The baby, whose eyes sparkled like rubies, lit up everyone with his face on this beautiful day. The girl approached this beautiful boy and was enchanted by his wonderful smile. Suddenly, she was caught off guard by the young man, but he clearly did not wish her harm. So Marie calmed down. She turned tenderly to the guy, and with a smile on her face, said that there were only 3 of them, and he had nothing to worry about. The girl offered to hold the baby in her arms, to which the boy and the guy began to look awkward. The young man did not understand how to behave with the baby, and was afraid of overdoing it with his strength. Looking at the guy's efforts, the lady wondered if he was taking on too much, since he was a minister after all, and not a warrior. Her eyes were in bewilderment at the boy she saw. She wondered in her head and realized that she was in heaven. The girl could not take her eyes off this charming baby, and was overly delighted by his angelic appearance. In confusion, rocking the stroller with the little boy, she asked herself more and more questions. Suddenly, a girl ran in with a worried look and began asking what was wrong with the young gentleman and why he was not moving. She told Marie to take care of Prince Brielle, because she still had a lot of work to do. Then Marie began to remember, because the names that the lady had named seemed familiar to her. She remembered that these were names from a novella she loved to read on her way to work. The girl was shocked, because after thinking about it for a long time, she realized that she had read a novella right before her death. She also remembered that Marie from that novel was supposed to kill that baby, and she was horrified. Anxious thoughts did not leave her. She did not know how to return to her world and what to do next. The girl, in despair, came to the conclusion that she could not return home, and plunged even deeper into her disturbing thoughts. And suddenly, a sweet child's voice sounded, not far from her, and Marie came to her senses. She was pulled out of the pitch darkness of despair by a sweet little boy whose name she had known for a long time, Brielle. Thoughts immediately ran through her head about what would happen when she left, whether Brielle would die, and these thoughts immediately sent a herd of goosebumps across her skin. Hearing his charming laugh, she told herself that she would not let this angel die. On that day, clinging to the young master, Marie realized the purpose of her life and began to move forward. After the time when Brielle was supposed to die, Marie stopped trying to return to her world. It's been 3 months now that Marie has been sitting with this wonderful baby, and she definitely enjoys what she does. She became very close to Brielle, and she so wanted his parents to see what he would grow up to be. But unfortunately, they died, and he was adopted by his uncle. As a nanny, Marie changed the plot of the novel and saved the little prince from death, which also jinxed the life of his uncle. Marie asked Brielle not to forget her when he grew up, because it was she who saved his life. Unfortunately, the Count, when he first saw the girl with the baby, thought that she wanted to kill him, although Marie wanted to practice with Brielle. What if she hadn't come to her senses then and couldn't explain to her uncle what these exercises were for? He turned away, put away the weapon, and it seemed that Marie had managed to win his trust. Meanwhile, the baby was already diligently doing the exercises and was doing it very well. The large, graceful doors swung open, and the Count entered the mansion with a serious face. He wanted to pick up Brielle, but the girl said that he couldn't get him until he washed his hands. Marie clearly got on the gentleman's nerves, but nothing could be done. That's just her character. She and the little prince were playing, when suddenly the Count's voice was heard calling them to him. Now, looking at Brielle in the cradle, the gentleman looked confused and did not understand what he would do without a nanny. This is understandable, because this is his first time raising a child, and he doesn't know the basics that would help with raising him. To diffuse the situation, Marie suggested playing hide and seek, to which the Count asked how to play it. Then the girl happily showed him, together with Brielle, what hide and seek was, and suggested that he try it. The gentleman looked shocked, because if he remembered how he behaved a couple of hours ago, it began to seem that such fun was definitely not for him. And so the guy pulled himself together and, very confused and embarrassed, began to play with Brielle. When the baby reacted, the Count looked at Marie with great enthusiasm. and she just smiled sweetly and thought how funny he was. She felt calm that the guy would at least be able to play with Brielle. For a start, that was enough. More than anything, Marie wanted to protect the baby, and an energy flared up inside her that pushed her to live this life. The girl began to carefully put Brielle on his feet and try to take the first steps with him. Suddenly, a little girl ran out, who also wanted to walk, and accidentally pushed Brielle. Marie was very scared. Her goal in life is to protect the baby. He can't fall. It's dangerous. The little girl saved Brielle from being hit, and it became clear that she meant him no harm. Once Marie was sure that the prince was okay, she asked Ellie if everything was okay. The girl, with delicate features and insanely bright eyes, turned away and drooped. She may have thought that Marie would scold her, but she just said that the floors here were very hard, and they should walk holding hands. Ellie really liked this idea, her face filled with joy again, and a smile spread across her entire face. This charming girl is Marie's sister, who played an important role in the latter's acceptance into the Count's family as a nanny. Since Marie had not given birth, Brielle was nursed by a woman named Erin, but she was unable to care for him full-time due to her having children of her own. In the original, it was Marie who said that she could not trust the young heir to anyone but herself, and if earlier it seemed that she was hired because of her status, now it has become clear that she was hired because of her experience in raising her younger children. Brielle didn't like Marie at all. He cried, screamed, and didn't want to accept her at all. However, when they were about to change the nanny, their relationship with the prince suddenly improved. It happened on the day when the girl who had been in an accident woke up in the body of the real Marie. Ellie, along with her sister and Brielle, began to take the first steps towards a new stage for the baby. They live with the Count's family, and the girl sometimes also wants to look after the prince. After Brielle learned to crawl, he began to cover this distance frequently. Marie hugged the little prince to herself with affection and delight for learning basic skills so quickly. At just 7 months old, Brielle has already started to move his legs, although just a month ago he wasn't even crawling. He probably got his genes from his uncle, and when he grows up, he will be taller than everyone else. The baby is growing so fast, and the Count hasn't seen him for several days, because he's so busy at the end of the year that he can't get out of the palace. He was in a hurry to get home to see the prince, but unfortunately, he was already asleep, and sadness was visible on the guy's face. Marie made him happy by telling him that he could quietly look at the baby while he was sleeping, and the Count's mood immediately improved. The young gentleman was snoring sweetly in his sleep, probably having wonderful and vivid dreams. The boy worriedly said that the baby had lost weight, but Marie reassured him, saying that he had been overly active lately. She thought about how surprised the Count would be at how much the baby had changed. He wanted to touch this sweet little baby, but Marie told him to wake him up with her cold hands. The girl looked at the guy and realized that he had also lost quite a bit of weight during the time he had not been home, but this made him even more handsome. Marie looked at the Count's facial features, to which the guy asked what had happened. She became embarrassed and changed the subject, saying that she would sing Brielle a lullaby. She thought that the guy would not notice anything in the dark. The girl didn't understand why she had to sing a lullaby to an already sleeping baby, but since she had already said it, she had to sing. Under the moonlight from the window, in complete silence, the Count listened to Marie sing a lullaby to the little prince and enjoyed it. In the morning, the girl and Brielle joyfully greeted the Count. Marie understood his desire to meet the young gentleman. The boy approached the baby and began to gently try to talk to him, and he did it quite well. Marie told him that Brielle was already teething, and the young gentleman joyfully opened his mouth, showing his front teeth. The Count was upset because all this time he had not participated at all in his upbringing, and he had no one more valuable than his nephew, so he would like to spend as much time with him as possible. The girl told him that Brielle would show him more now and sat the boy down on the floor. The Count was delighted that the baby was already sitting up and realized that he was spending very little time with the young gentleman. Marie assumed that the little prince would be glad to see his uncle, and that tomorrow, because of the count's work, he would come when he was already asleep. She wondered if she should try to do something that they both would enjoy, and perhaps bring them closer together. The girl wanted Brielle to try out a texture game that many kids his age love. After much thought, Marie came up with a solution. She used seaweed to play with. At such times, many die of hunger, and therefore, taking too good products would be a crime. And the Count began to work hard from home in order to spend more time with his nephew. Marie suggested that after the guy saw how his nephew had grown up, he realized that he couldn't miss such valuable moments. The girl called the Count and took him to the bathroom to show him her creation. With a smile on her face, she pointed to the bathtub and said it was seaweed, waiting for his reaction. The guy was very surprised and didn't know how to react to what he saw because he was seeing something like this for the first time. He, trying to hide his emotions of surprise, asked if she wanted to wash the young master. Marie explained to the Count that this was a game with textures and was very good for developing muscles and expressing emotions. She began to lower Brielle into the bath when the boy confusedly grabbed the baby from her arms. Then, the girl invited the Count to join the little prince, and he, perplexed by the upcoming game, agreed. Marie placed seaweed on Brielle's eyebrows, to which the baby responded as agreed. Then the little prince grabbed the seaweed from his face and laughed merrily. The Count cutely shot at Brielle and definitely agreed, since the kid liked this game. They started playing this wonderful texture game together and having fun. Suddenly, the guy splashed water towards the boy, to which he looked in surprise. Brielle raised his hands sharply and playfully and lowered them into the water, thereby splashing the Count with water. Marie, surprised and even confused, asked if everything was okay with the guy. No one expected this from the baby. The guy, adjusting his silky hair, calmly replied that everything was fine. The girl was confused when she saw how drops were running down his gentle face and began to lose her balance. She fell right on top of the Count, her heart pounding, and she didn't understand what was happening. Marie jumped up sharply with an apology, after which she immediately ran away. The boy stayed with the baby, but even so, his cheeks were red from embarrassment. Ellie approached Marie and asked what she was doing. The girl replied that she sewed toys and invited Ellie to look at her creations. The little girl, looking down, asked if these toys were for the young master, hoping that she would get some too. Marie stroked her head and said that the bear was for her, to which Ellie's eyes sparkled again. She happily asked, "What about the hair?" and her eyes lit up with happiness and excitement. And Marie calmly said that the bunny was for the baby, but it was a little bigger than a bear, so she should be patient. The girl thought that, despite the fact that Ellie had grown up quite a bit, she still behaved like a little girl. This behavior on Ellie's part reminds Marie of how shocked she was when she first saw the house where they used to live. She used the money she earned from the Count to provide them with clothes, but toys were out of the question. Of course, what shocked Marie most was that they were left alone at home while she was working. It hurt her to look at them, so she asked the Count for a favor, and he gave them a whole room on the same floor as Brielle, and they were incredibly happy with his action. Marie burst into tears of joy that she could at least give something to these lovely children. After this, the girl's motivation increased, and she began to sew toys more diligently. Even beyond the walls of the mansion, children's loud echoes of crying could be heard. The little prince was indignant and screamed because he did not want to change his diaper. Then Marie showed Brielle the bear she had sewn for the young master. The baby, seeing him, stared at him, and at that moment he was caught by a worker at the mansion. When they changed his diaper, he continued to be indignant, and Marie calmed him down. Brielle had already lived for almost a year, and the girl so wanted to believe that everything would be fine. But sometimes Marie feels anxious even on the calmest and quietest days. After all, it is still not clear who, and for what purpose, ordered the killing of this lovely baby. The Count sat with the young gentleman and read him a fascinating book about dragons. He told the girl that he thought the baby really liked the dragons, Marie smiled silently, thinking that reading the fairy tale had brought them closer together, and they had begun to spend a lot of time together since she had to leave for a short time. The girl needed to bring some things, and Brielle has been very shy lately and refuses to spend time with anyone else. However, the Count responded to the butler's request and agreed to sit with the baby, and Brielle immediately stopped crying. But after only half an hour, the Count deeply regretted his decision. He didn't understand how a one-year-old child could be so fast and overly active. Brielle climbed onto the high table and began furiously throwing books from the shelves all over the office. Suddenly, he saw a beautiful picture from a book and was very confused by what he saw. The Count did not understand what was happening and did not know what to do. So he called Marie. She ran to the guy very quickly and immediately asked what happened and why she was called so urgently. The guy nervously began to say that the baby was sick and probably had a fever. The girl looked at Brielle and immediately understood what was happening. She immediately felt calm. He liked the dragon from the book so much that the Count mistook his delight for illness. Marie reassured him that he had nothing to worry about, as the baby simply liked the dragons. The guy, however, looked away in embarrassment and said that he understood everything, thereby awkwardly asking for forgiveness. This incident led to the Count starting to read his nephew tales about dragons. Marie only smiled and pretended not to notice his excitement, but it was clear that the Count was shaking with fear. The deaths of his older brother, wife, and Brielle's parents were not detailed in the novel, but it was said that they died in an accident while traveling to see the Count. If he had arrived a couple of minutes later, the baby would have died with his parents. The young prince sneezed, and the Count immediately thought about the baby's worsening condition and began to worry about him. Marie believes that it is precisely because of this incident that the Count is so worried about his nephew. Apparently, there was a huge wound left on his heart after the death of his brother and his wife. The housekeeper called Marie very loudly. The baby is always so quiet with her, but as soon as she moves away, he starts crying. The girl told Marie that Brielle had not calmed down the entire time she was in the bathhouse. In response, Marie thanked the worker and took the baby into her arms, and she remained standing there in surprise, thinking that the boy seemed to have a split personality. The girl told the young gentleman that he was becoming more and more stubborn, and she did not like this behavior. And when Marie told Brielle about changing his diaper, he said his first word. The girl looked at this little charming boy in bewilderment and could not believe her ears. He said neither mom, nor dad, nor even uncle. He said her name without being able to pronounce the letter R, which was even cuter. Even though it wasn't entirely hers, only Brielle could ease the suffering she experienced after coming to this world. The precious baby she managed to save became the only reason to live on. Ellie happily walked towards her little sister and hummed a melody that she really liked. She happily greeted her sister and the young master, who were playing enthusiastically. Marie looked at Ellie in surprise, and the baby continued to look at the Tower of Cups. The girl was angry that Brielle didn't pay attention to her because of some toy. She jumped onto the bed with all her might, and the Tower of Cups flew in all directions. The baby got angry at her and crawled after her, and Ellie started running away and saying that it wasn't on purpose. Marie was smiling at that moment and understood that her little sister did it on purpose. The girl offered the children a snack to fill them with energy and continue having fun. Marie said they can eat with their hands and compared it to playing with textures. Ellie took a piece and served it to Brielle after letting the sweet potato cool. After that, she took a piece for herself, but it turned out to be too hot. Then Marie offered to blow on it, but the little girl refused, saying that she would do everything herself. Apparently, she wants to be like her older sister, and she considers her ideal. And suddenly, Brielle called Ellie's name and did it so tenderly. After all, he really likes her. They started discussing what they wanted to do after snacking, and each offered their own options. And near the door stood a little boy and eagerly watched what was happening. Marie told Ellie that she would now bring something to drink, and she suggested that she take her time. When she turned around, she noticed a boy looking at her with fear. It turned out to be her little brother Barry. He was older than Ellie, but that didn't mean he didn't want to play with them. He bewilderedly apologized for distracting Marie, but she reassured him, saying that she was expecting a boy. The girl invited him to play with Brielle and spend time with Ellie, and the boy's eyes lit up. The boy happily promised that they would have fun and ran off to play with the young master. Marie left with the thought that she needed to quickly bring drinks and join them. Barry happily offered the baby to play with his bright red ball, hoping that he would not be afraid of it. And Ellie was surprised by the appearance of her brother next to the little prince and began to look indignantly. The baby crawled towards the boy, and Ellie got angry and shouted that she was playing with Brielle. Barry continued to lure the little prince to him and said that the baby would be more interested with him, to which Ellie exclaimed that Brielle had already gotten used to her, and she was sure that he would have much more fun with her, since she even cooled down his sweet potatoes. An argument broke out between the brother and sister over the baby's attention, and they wanted to kill each other without saying a word. And Brielle sat on the floor, confused, unable to decide between a sweet potato or a teddy bear. At that moment, Marie arrived and realized that they were fighting for the baby's attention and that the battle was already in full swing. And Brielle, seeing Marie, chose who he would go to and ran to his favorite nanny. Marie hugged the baby, and Barry and Ellie looked sadly at the scene. They realized that they clearly wouldn't be able to overcome their sister, and that the baby would still choose her. And Marie looked at the children with a smile, and thought how cute they were, even in such a situation. So the little gentleman turned 1 year old. Everyone sat at the table and joyfully congratulated him. The baby happily accepted all the congratulations and was in seventh heaven. Brielle's first birthday, the Count decided to celebrate his nephew's birthday in the mansion in the circle of his close associates. Instead of a lavish banquet, he organized a nutritious dinner, especially for Brielle, and instead of high-status nobles, he invited Ellie and Barry. Barry was surprised because he did not expect to be invited to an aristocrat's birthday. Marie thought that the Count had made the right choice, because the young master would have been very uncomfortable among strangers. And so the baby smiles, the most contented smile, and his eyes sparkle brighter than any star. The Count said that it was time to begin, and the girl only confirmed his words, nodding her head boldly. The guy offered to blow out the candles with Marie, and the girl looked at him in surprise. The Count beckoned her to come closer to him so that they could share this touching moment together. They began to slowly count to 3 before blowing out those candles burning brightly in the dark. At that moment, Marie wondered why she felt so nervous around the Count. She was sure that Brielle could clearly feel her heartbeat and was even more worried. The Count looked at Marie and could not take his eyes off her. She looked gentle and thoughtful. Suddenly, the children shouted the last number, and the boy and girl suddenly came to their senses. They almost forgot about the candles because of their own thoughts, but this is not the first time this has bothered them. Marie congratulated the young gentleman on his birthday and wished him to be just as healthy, and Brielle kissed her on the cheek in response, which greatly surprised the girl at that moment. Everyone looked at the scene in shock and was very confused. Against the backdrop of the sunset, the mansion looked majestic, but in reality, things were not so calm, and rumors had already spread throughout it. Marie walked through the dark mansion and thought about what a significant day it was. In the original story, Brielle didn't live to see his first birthday, but this time he did. Marie was very touched. She was so happy that she managed to achieve the goal she set for herself by getting into this novel. She walked past his room and hoped that he would continue to grow in peace. The girl saw an open door through which a light was burning. She was surprised that the Count was not yet asleep and thought about whether to bring him coffee. She looked into the room with a very sad aura and was extremely surprised by what she saw in it. The Count stood in front of the portrait of his late brother and cried bitterly from pain and grief. He said that he missed him and that he might not be able to handle raising Brielle. He wished his brother could see Brielle's smile and how healthy he was growing up. Now Marie understood why the Count had decided to arrange exactly this kind of celebration. He did it as a gift for his brother, so that he could at least enjoy this moment from heaven. He provided his son with happiness if he had such a wonderful and joyful birthday. Of course, Brielle's safety was a priority, but Marie decided to slightly adjust the goals in her care diary to include an item about happiness. Ellie, next to Brielle, exclaimed that the long-awaited day had finally arrived, and the baby looked at her in bewilderment and did not understand what kind of reaction she expected from the little prince. It was the day when the young gentleman had already learned to walk fully by the hand. Ellie asked him if he remembered the moment when they tried to walk, but they couldn't. Marie told Ellie to be careful, because Brielle was just learning to walk and she still needed to be careful. They began to walk happily holding hands. Ellie was very careful and did not let the young gentleman fall. And at that moment the baby was sweetly saying her name. Happiness was visible on his face. The girl asked the baby to kiss her on the cheek if he was having fun and felt happy around her. But Brielle turned away from her, and Ellie immediately drooped. She hoped to receive the same attention as her sister. Marie watched carefully everything that was happening with Ellie and Brielle and laughed happily. The girl thought how sweet they all were, and that she was very lucky to be a nanny and sister to such wonderful children. Marie approached the Count's luxurious door and knocked modestly, waiting for an answer. He allowed her to enter, and the girl said that she wanted to discuss something very important with him. The Count looked at her with fear. Fear and hope for the safety of his master were visible in his eyes. Marie reassured him, saying that the young master was fine and had nothing to worry about. She thinks it would be nice if Brielle made friends his own age, but she's not sure if aristocrats introduce their children to each other. The Count said that children usually make friends at aristocratic gatherings, and Marie mentioned to him that he never went anywhere. The story said that the Count did not like being in company since childhood. Therefore, he had almost no acquaintances in high society, and only 2 boys as close friends. The Count said that one of his acquaintances had a son about Brielle's age, and he would talk to him. Marie was about to leave when the guy suddenly stopped her with just one word. He handed her a red box, and Marie looked at him awkwardly, not understanding what was happening. He opened the box, and inside was a brooch, shining in the sun's rays and shimmering from one shade to another. She asked what it was, to which the Count replied that Ellie told him that you were buying a brooch for yourself, but while you were sitting with Brielle, it went out of fashion. The girl was very surprised by what she heard and could not even imagine that such a thing could happen. It was the brooch that Ellie was talking about that Marie was wearing when the girl from another world entered her body. It had to be removed because any accessories could be dangerous for small children. Surprisingly, Ellie remembered this, and suddenly, the little girl noticed how much her sister had changed, and now it worries her a lot. She and Barry had been starved for attention, so they took the change in stride. Marie thanked the Count. She was incredibly pleased with this gift. Just think how carefully he thought out all the details before the purchase. The guy was perplexed and thought that the girl didn't like the brooch and asked if everything was okay. He said that he chose her himself, and therefore she may well not be to her taste, and Marie asked in surprise what he said again. He said that it was the first time he had to choose a woman's brooch, so he could not be sure that it was good. Marie smiled tenderly at him and said that this brooch was simply beautiful. He awkwardly rejoiced that the girl liked the gift, and they went their separate ways with peace of mind. Brielle hit him angrily and called for his uncle in his loud, childish voice. The Count was surprised that he called him uncle and asked what had happened and why the little boy was so worried about something. The baby angrily continued to ask him to move away from his beloved nanny. Apparently, he wanted to get all of Marie's attention. The girl laughed while the boy drooped and didn't know how to react to the kid's words. Marie began to explain to Brielle that they were choosing a new book for him and suggested that he read a book with other animals. The kid persistently replied that he only wanted a book about dragons and was not interested in anything else. The girl reached for a book about dragons, and the Count asked if there were any more books about them. Marie replied that no, but we could write it ourselves, and asked if the Count could draw well. The guy asked if she would write, to which she remained silent, and everything immediately became clear. After that, they read the same book about dragons together, and the baby, as always, looked at the pictures with fascination. Dear Brielle fell into a wonderful sleep, and the Count carefully covered him with a warm and beautiful blanket. Marie praised the guy for doing a good job, to which the guy was surprised and at the same time very happy. Compared to how things were when the girl came into this world, the Count is doing better at raising Brielle. The guy suggested going to rest, and Marie, agreeing, ran after him. While she was running, accidentally, not noticing the Count's shoulder, she hit him hard, which caused bewilderment in the guy. He turned and asked if everything was okay, and Marie froze from the radiant beauty of the Count. The girl couldn't take her eyes off him, because he was very close to her at that moment. Marie suddenly came to her senses and, moving away from the guy, replied that everything was fine. She said it was time to go before the young master woke up and quickly ran away. And in the girl's head, there were thoughts that at night, handsome men are especially dangerous. Barry and Ellie were having fun playing with the little prince, and the girl asked the baby his opinion, namely which horse would win. He chose the blue horse, and Ellie happily said that the horse with the red ribbon won. Then Barry, with a serious face, lightly nudged Ellie to stop teasing the baby. They started to quarrel loudly, and the little boy sat and got angry because he didn't understand what was happening. Abruptly, Brielle shouted that Barry was stupid and hit him with his small childish fist. The children turned around in shock and immediately stopped arguing, not understanding why he did it, and the baby continued to look at them angrily. He was filled with anger. Barry began to ask why the young master hit him and why he was angry. The kid started shouting out words, trying to explain what exactly had upset him. Then Ellie jumped into Brielle's arms for standing up for her, and Barry stood there with a downcast face because he was protecting the baby from his little sister. The boy was very upset that Brielle hit him, even though he was protecting him from the girl. Meanwhile, Marie was diligently drawing cards with different animals for the young gentleman. This method should help the child remember more different animals and insects. The girl wondered if it was clear and looked at the drawings again. The girl realized that she was bad at drawing, but she still didn't give up because she wanted to teach the little boy something new. At this time, the Count came up from behind and asked her if she was drawing. Marie beamed with happiness again. It seemed to her that not all was lost. And suddenly, the guy asked if it was possible that Brielle had drawn it. The girl became embarrassed and looked downcast. Marie awkwardly acknowledged the creation as her own, and even explained that it was an ant. The Count looked at the drawing with a grin and realized how badly she was doing it, after which he took a pencil in his hands and drew the most wonderful and beautiful ant. While the guy was drawing, Marie stood silently and looked with the most upset expression. Marie asked the butler about the Count's grades during his studies because she was interested in his education. And the man, with a sparkle in his eyes, exclaimed that he was first in all disciplines. The girl was shocked and even a little upset that the Count had also succeeded in drawing. The guy reached for Marie's card, and the girl asked him why he needed this ridiculous drawing. The Count replied that he would collect them as memories, and when Brielle grew up, he would show them to him. Marie exclaimed that she would not give up the card, and the guy said that she herself wanted to show it to him. The Count raised his hand so high that Marie, even standing on her tiptoes, could not reach the card. The girl started pushing him to take the drawing for herself because she clearly didn't want Brielle to see it. The Count froze. Looking at Marie, he did not know what to say because they again found themselves in an awkward situation. And suddenly, the girl abruptly snatches the card from his hand, and the guy doesn't even have time to understand what happened. Marie began to be glad that she had taken her card back and looked at him sarcastically. But the Count only smiled and covered his face with his hand so as not to show that he was bothered by the awkward situation that had just happened. Marie tenderly held the difficult gentleman in her arms and said that a friend would soon come to him. Marie hoped that Brielle would be happy to see a child his own age and that he would be able to make a friend. His world will become a little wider after joining society. That's what the girl thought when she suggested this to the Count. The kid didn't understand what Marie wanted to explain to him, and the girl said that he would find out later and that he already had a rich vocabulary for his age. The Count called dear Brielle to him and wanted to introduce him to a wonderful boy. He pointed to a boy named Jay, the son of the Count's friend. The kids smiled joyfully and sweetly at each other and greeted each other in a friendly manner, their eyes shining brightly. The Count and his friend decided to go away to talk, and they left Marie with the kids. The girl asked the young gentleman if he wanted to play with his friend, and Jay was waiting impatiently for Brielle's answer. Marie thought that children at that age usually like toys, and it would be easier for them to get along with each other if they picked them out. 10 minutes had passed since the kids had started playing, and suddenly a scream was heard. The Count and his comrade ran into the room in alarm at the noise they heard that could be heard throughout the house. Everyone stood in shock, and Jay cried loudly, and Brielle held his teddy bear in his arms. The baby liked the young gentleman's favorite toy while they were choosing what to play. Only Marie, Ellie, Barry, and Brielle himself were allowed to touch Miss Bear. They both liked her too much, so they quarreled because they couldn't decide who would get her. Marie apologized to the Count's friend, but he insisted that everything was fine, since Jay had taken the toy without asking. And the Count, at that moment, looked at the children and did not understand how to react and what to do to smooth out the situation. It seems like the first attempt at making friends was a failure, but Brielle still has his whole life ahead of him. Marie walked through the dark mansion and was glad that nothing terrible had happened. The girl understood that Brielle was growing up safely, but something was bothering her. One problem was still unresolved, and that was what worried Marie the most at the moment. When she woke up in this world, on a weekday morning, the money that Marie had received as the first payment for killing Brielle was already lying under her bed. The girl looked out the window and did not understand why they still had not come for her soul. She carefully examined everything around her and found nothing suspicious. What should Marie do if this assignment has already been passed on to someone else in the mansion? She would really like everything to be as peaceful, and perhaps she should tell the Count that someone wants to kill Brielle. But how can she do it? While she was lost in these thoughts in the dark mansion, the Count found her and asked what had alarmed the lady. The girl looked towards the guy with fear. She did not expect to see him. The Count looked at her and asked what had brought her out at such a late hour, hoping that she would not upset him. He was worried that something had happened to Brielle and looked both thoughtful and worried. The girl hesitated, but still said that she wanted to discuss something serious with him. The girl sipped tea and asked if the Count had selected knights to protect Brielle. She thought that she couldn't tell the Count everything, but she could at least guide him a little. And the girl also boldly recalled that Jay was already under guard, even though he was the same age as Brielle. The Count did not understand why she had come at such an hour to discuss this, and Marie explained that she could easily forget about it later, so she decided to tell him right away. The guy smiled sweetly as he listened to her story, and the girl lowered her head in embarrassment. The Count was amazed that all this time Marie was thinking about Brielle and seemed not to think at all about herself. He said he had a couple of nights in mind, and he would like to go on a ride with Brielle. Marie's anxiety for Brielle grew sharply, but the Count reassured her, saying that he would be under the protection of the royal guard. The girl asked when they were going to leave, and the guy told her that he had already requested leave. He thought he deserved a break after so many years of long and hard work. Marie became worried that something had happened in the palace and asked the guy with great interest. The Count looked at the girl and realized that he had not met a person for a long time who was so sincerely worried about him. and that it was difficult for him to get used to these new sensations. The guy looked away and said he just wanted to take a break from work, considering how much he had been sitting lately. Ellie angrily shouted at Barry that it was her turn to play with the young Master Eye, but he didn't want to give in. They started arguing again, and Brielle looked at them in bewilderment and wondered what to do to make them stop arguing. The little boy saw the gardener watering the flowers and called the children to go to the big pool. They began to splash around in the water together, forgetting all their quarrels, and happily created new memories. Marie waited calmly until they had played enough with the snow-white soft towels in their hands. Suddenly, she saw the Count, who returned early from work today. She thought that he had already taken a vacation. Marie started calling the children to finish, when suddenly, the boy jumped into the water towards them. He greeted the boys joyfully, and each of their faces showed more joy than had ever been seen before. His assistant was extremely shocked by the Count's behavior, because he had never seen him so happy. He said that he looked completely different with such a sincere smile on his face. The assistant began to beg the Count to stay and not go on vacation, because without him, everything would collapse. Then Brielle pulled hard at his uncle's clothes and very sweetly asked him to repeat the jump. The kid said that he really enjoyed that moment and he didn't want to forget it. The guy smiled and said that he would definitely repeat it and that the baby would never forget this wonderful day. Marie thought about what the servants had said, that without the Count, everything would wither away, and she could not fully understand why. And now she understood how important his work in the yard was, and even began to be proud of all the work he had done. Marie and the Count went to Brielle's first picnic, hoping they would have a wonderful time. She asked the baby not to go too far away from her. After all, she was worried about his protection. And the Count thought that they had talked about security, and he, of course, had taken care of it. But it seemed that everything was going smoothly anyway. Brielle asked Marie to go further afield, but she said that she didn't know the area well and couldn't. The Count said with joy and a smile that he would go with them and make sure that they did not get lost. Brielle ran very quickly into the forest, and Marie could not keep up with him. Suddenly, the baby let go of the girl's hand, and she was immediately filled with anxiety for Brielle. She started shouting at him to wait, but she still couldn't keep up with him. And suddenly, the baby stopped and pointed to a cute rabbit, which he was apparently running after. The girl calmed down and explained to him that this wonderful rabbit was a resident of this forest. Marie suddenly felt someone's gaze fall on her and realized that they were being watched. She grabbed the baby, pushing him to the ground and covering him with her body, hoping that she could protect him. The Count immediately came running to the girl's loud screams and anxiously asked what was happening. She explained that she felt like someone was following them, and she was terrified for Brielle. He reasoned that even if there was someone in the bushes, they had already fled, and he would not be able to find them. The Count reassured the girl, saying that he would ask the knights to inspect the area, and took Brielle in his arms. An anxious Marie told the baby that she would return soon, and gave him to the Count with shaking hands. The knights did not find a single suspicious person in the park, and this reassured both the Count and Marie. They were really lucky that there was no one there, otherwise who knows what could have happened. The strange man stroked the rabbit and blamed himself for letting them go. He wondered if Marie was living well after the betrayal. Time passed, and now Brielle's second birthday has arrived. The baby is growing before our eyes. This time the Count decided to invite the nobles as well, and a very large number of important people gathered. Marie kept thinking about that incident in the park. She was glad that she had just imagined it, because nothing strange happened after that. Brielle shyly tugged at the girl's skirt and modestly called her name, hoping she would hear. He probably feels uncomfortable seeing so many unfamiliar faces on such a holiday. Suddenly, an elderly man called out to them and waved his hand at them with a joyful face, beckoning them to him. Marie saw him and realized that he was Brielle's grandfather on his mother's side and greeted him. The Lord smiled sweetly at the baby and said that he was glad to be present at his celebration in person. Brielle got scared and hid behind Marie's back, to which his grandfather laughed, realizing that the little boy was shy. The count said that the Lord's lands were far from here, but he arrived on time. The grandfather called the little boy over and invited him to look at the gift, which he was extremely confident in. It was a cute little dragon, and the Lord really hoped that Brielle would like it madly. The baby immediately took it in his hands and began to admire the toy very much. When Marie asked him to thank his grandfather for the gift, Brielle became embarrassed and looked down. After which, in a shy voice, he uttered words of gratitude, which sounded more pleasant from his lips than ever. The Lord laughed again and thanked Marie for caring for Brielle and raising him. The girl said that this was her job, and the young gentleman was very gentle and quiet, so it was easy with him. Brielle shouted sharply to Marie about Miss Bear, and the girl, not understanding the baby, asked again what he wanted. She warned the Lord that they needed to move away. The little one wanted to put a new toy with the others. The girl and Brielle walked up the stairs, and the grandfather continued to silently look at them. Khan was glad that he was surrounded by such good people and could grow up in peace. He turned to his late daughter and said that her son was living a very glorious life. He hoped that she felt happy watching from heaven. Ellie persistently called the young gentleman to her because she clearly wanted to play with him. She said that because of the holiday, they were unable to go sledding yesterday and they needed to do it today. They approached the slide, and the girl began to talk about this structure that Marie had recommended. Ellie diligently explained how to ride down the slides, imagining pictures in front of her. She told him that he would now be going down very quickly and let the baby go. They looked at each other happily. They really enjoyed skating, and they continued playing together. The gardener looked at this picture and was surprised that Ellie had so many privileges, because the good gentleman would not allow him to ride with him. Ellie offered to give the bear a ride so that she wouldn't get bored just watching. The girl also tried on the bear's new dress and thought what a good sister she had. When it comes to Brielle, she thinks through everything down to the smallest detail, which really offended the girl. While Ellie was thinking about this, the baby stood up on his feet and began to repeat her funny, dissatisfied pose. The girl was surprised that the young gentleman was repeating after her and said that she saw this pose at the market. Maria's loud voice was suddenly heard, shocked by the information she had heard. She angrily asked where Ellie could have seen this pose, clearly not wanting her to ever repeat it. She began to scold them, because this way they could hurt someone's feelings, and this would reflect badly on their reputation. Marie kept offering Brielle a taste of the delicious potatoes and moving the spoon closer to him. He must have really enjoyed the potato. He looked like a little bird while he was chewing it. As the count was about to leave, Marie asked if he would like to try feeding Brielle. Grandfather exclaimed that the count never feeds a child by hand and that this is unacceptable. The guy stopped him, saying that everything was fine, and he was even interested in trying it. He began to try feeding Brielle and slowly brought the spoon up, hoping for a positive reaction. The baby didn't eat, and Marie advised him not to do it that way, but to try something else. On the second try, the count managed to feed the young gentleman, and his eyes sparkled. The count was very happy and decided to continue feeding his nephew. He found it fascinating, but the baby refused to eat again, which put the count in an awkward position, and he lowered his head. Suddenly, the guy changed the subject and told Marie that he wanted to know something about tomorrow. He asked the girl if she was free tomorrow night, and they both caught each other's eyes. Marie tenderly answered the count that she was free and asked if everything was okay, hoping to find out what he wanted from his daughter. And the guy, looking away from embarrassment, invited her to dinner at a very nice establishment. She began to feel embarrassed and wonder how he could invite her to dinner in such a setting, and realized that this was an invitation to a date. But the girl was very much mistaken, because it was not a date at all, but something else. Marie did not understand how she could think of a date. Of course, the count meant dinner with the young gentleman. The guy asked the girl if Brielle had gained weight, because he looked much fatter than usual. Marie explained that it was chilly today, and she had dressed him in about 6 layers of clothing. The Count told the girl not to forget to take care of herself, to which she replied that she was not cold at all. He lowered his eyes in awkwardness. The Count did not understand why, since she herself said that it was cool, the girl was not cold. Then the guy shouted that if she got sick and infected Brielle, she would go to hell and start blaming herself. Marie immediately ran to get dressed. She was still very worried about the baby's condition. The Count realized that she meant much more to him than just his nephew's nanny. They started having dinner, and the guy said that he would feed the baby himself, and Marie could eat in peace, but the girl objected, saying that it was her duty to feed Brielle. Then the Count told her to show the young master how much she liked the food. She started trying the food and was surprised at how delicious it was, and the place itself looked very beautiful. But it made her think about Ellie and Barry, who, unfortunately, were left at home. The Count said they could take them, but Marie decided not to because of the numerous rumors, and now regrets it. Next time she will definitely take them with her and give them the best dinner of their lives. While they were talking about food, a table near the wall in the establishment noticed them. The man asked the woman in shock if it was the Prime Minister sitting at the table. The woman asked in surprise who he was sitting with, but unfortunately, they couldn't see from there. They couldn't believe it, because they had heard about something similar from colleagues, and rumors spread quickly. The man immediately remembered how the Count had scolded him for not doing his job well. He was surprised that the Count was smiling and wanted to get rid of this candelabra because Marie was not visible because of it. Suddenly, the woman told the man that they should have their dinner in peace and looked at him angrily. The Count, along with Marie and Brielle, returned after dinner, and the girl asked the baby if he wanted to sleep. The guy asked Marie if it was too hard since she held him all the way home. The Count offered to give the girl a massage, and she asked him again in surprise. He explained to her that although he now held a civil position, he had to study basic medicine during his nightly service. They began to talk about the service, and the Count said that he had left it early. There was nothing in the novel about the Count being able to wield a sword or any other weapon. The guy said that it was time for Brielle to hire teachers, and Marie supported the idea. The little boy showed the girl his toys, which were standing beautifully on the shelf. The girl said with a smile that they looked cute together, and that the baby chose the right place. Suddenly, Brielle showed the cards that the Count had drawn for him. On the day the girl realized that he was a hopeless artist, Marie asked him if he remembered who was depicted on the card, and the young gentleman replied that it was an ant. The girl confirmed his words and said that the ant has 6 legs, and the baby asked why. She began to explain that it was an insect, and the baby asked the same question again. Marie didn't know how to answer these questions. Brielle had clearly put her in an awkward position. Apparently, the young gentleman has reached this curious age, and it is no longer easy to stop him. The girl suggested asking her uncle for the answer to Brielle's extremely curious question. The kid quickly ran to his uncle, but he also managed to put him in an awkward position. Marie thought that during these half an hour the Count had turned pale, so she asked him if anyone would come to see us today. He started telling a story about some genius who took first place in the exam at the Royal Academy, but couldn't get a job because his stomach started hurting before the interview. So he decided that it would be easier to tutor for now and then find another job. Marie told Brielle that a teacher was coming to see him today, and she hoped everything would go well. Suddenly, the girl heard a loud scream from the room where they were studying. Marie was immediately overcome with panic. She stood up from her seat and abruptly burst into the room. She anxiously cried out whether everything was okay with the young master and what was going on. And in the room, everything seemed to be as usual, and nothing caused mistrust towards the teacher. Then the girl asked what happened between them and why she heard screams. Brielle's teacher said he was trying to teach the toddler his writing when he suddenly started screaming. Before this happened, they, together with the young master, learned to count and write numbers. Then the teacher, thinking that it would be easier for him to concentrate, suggested writing the name of the baby's uncle. To his proposal, Brielle replied that he wanted to write the name of his favorite nanny. Then the guy thought that since the baby loved her so much, it meant that she was a very good person. The teacher clearly liked Marie, and Brielle immediately sensed it and screamed. He started throwing everything around and shouting for him to leave, and the guy stood there in bewilderment. John and Marie found it difficult to understand what had happened, and they began to think actively. The girl thought that maybe Brielle had been slightly scolded, or maybe he was simply not used to doing things without her. John asked about words that the baby didn't like, but Marie couldn't remember anything like that. But she told him that the young master really liked dragons and sweet potatoes. The baby cheerfully asked Barry to continue to ride him in his arms, and Barry, delighted by his emotions, did not want to stop. Barry often plays with the young master, and this amuses and pleases Marie very much. Brielle probably likes playing with him because he is physically stronger than Ellie. Suddenly, Ellie joyfully ran out to Barry and the baby, holding an incredibly beautiful wreath in her hands. Marie was pleased to see that Ellie was no longer angry, but was looking for a way to play together. The little girl happily showed Brielle the wreath, which she considered her best creation, and wanted to give it to the young master. The baby drooped, and Ellie sadly asked if he liked it, hoping that she was just imagining it. Then the young gentleman lowered his head so that the girl could place the wreath on his head. Barry watched and wondered why Brielle had fallen for her acting skills. Marie looked at this with joy and thought about what kind of game they could come up with so that they could play together. Last time their game with water even made the Count smile. It would be nice if he could play with Brielle more often at night. The king came to the Count and mockingly asked if he had eaten before work, which caused the boy's displeasure. He answered with a serious expression that he had eaten and continued to work silently, hoping that the king would stop pestering him. The king said cheerfully that he couldn't even believe it because the guy was constantly working, to which the Count, with an angry look, demanded that they leave the office and not distract him from filling out important documents. But the king merely sat down on a chair and asked the boy if he wanted to have a drink that evening and stay the night. But the Count continued to refuse. The king began to ask why, to which the Count replied that he had a lot of things to do. The man told the guy that he had changed, whereas before he would have replied that he planned to work all night. He also said that he heard rumors that he even started smiling when a nanny for his nephew appeared in his life. The Count reflected that this only happened when he thought about Brielle and Marie, and the king asked about the baby's third birthday. The guy thought that even though he knew the answer, he still asked to be invited. His Majesty wanted to find out whether the Count was going to make his nephew his successor. The king continued to tell the Count that he loved his nephew so much that he wondered what would happen if the boy had his own child. The man also told the Count rumors about the young master's sweet nanny, about whom people can't stop talking. Suddenly, the Count became filled with anger and furiously asked who was spreading these rumors. And then he thought about why it bothered him so much that someone else was talking about her like that. He began to justify this by saying that if there were a lot of rumors, it could ruin her reputation. Marie tenderly folded Barry's old shirt and thought that he had long since outgrown it. She thought only about children, and this made her happy and gave her energy for new achievements. The girl heard a knock on the window, and she thought it was a bird, but she couldn't open it. She saw something behind the trees within the mansion's grounds and began to look closer. At that moment, she realized that the man who ordered Brielle's death had reached her. Goosebumps run down Marie's body, and her hands tremble with fear. She doesn't understand what to do or how to act. The feelings in reality and in the book are completely different, and this certainly scares her. The girl screamed in fear, asking who was standing there because she didn't understand what to do next. Suddenly, the man standing behind the tree suddenly disappeared from view, and Marie was trying to make him out. She looked into the distance in bewilderment and did not understand what to expect next. What if he appeared behind her? Ellie sat on the stairs in front of the house, in the rain, and sadly said that her sister and brother would come home late today, and she didn't have the keys. The girl sat in the rain for a very long time and waited for them to return to the house. And it was on this rainy day that Ellie never waited for her family to return. The little girl woke up in a strange house and, hearing a voice, thought that her little sister had arrived. Ellie overheard people talking in the house, saying that Marie had abandoned her. She also took all her money and simply ran away, abandoning her child to the mercy of fate. When the man and Ellie approached Marie's house, they saw her, and then the man shouted something after the girl and left the girl. Marie was indeed the kind of person who didn't care about the well-being of her younger brother and sister. She had nowhere to live, not enough money for anything, so she decided to give up Ellie. The children never went against Marie's will. They respected and at the same time feared her. One day, Marie brought food, and the baby had already eaten its fill, and the girl began to reproach the baby. Ellie begged her, but she angrily said that she would not get up from the table until she finished eating. She began to feed the younger ones when she learned that the Count was looking for a nanny for his nephew. Marie thought that their plump appearance would work to her advantage when she entered the Count's mansion. The girl was mired in debt, and when the loan sharks came for her soul, she simply ran away, abandoning Ellie, but she had to continue to earn a living. In the original story, a dark hand handed her a bag of silver coins when she had already become a nanny. Marie wondered if it was really this man standing in the bushes now, and she was still enveloped in fear. Or perhaps it just seemed that way to her, because the Count had reliable security. She really wanted to think so. The girl didn't understand what to do. She sat on the balcony with a downcast face, and all her clothes were already wet. Suddenly, Ellie ran up to Marie, and she suddenly came to her senses, and the bad thoughts left her head. The little girl asked what the girl was doing there and where the towel was, and the little boy brought her the towel. Brielle shouted that he would help wipe everything. He loved his nanny very much and wanted to help her. The girl realized that she was not alone and that she had nothing to fear with them. She felt much calmer. Marie and the Count were discussing the situation that had happened in his office, and both of them had a thoughtful look. The girl said that she couldn't see the man, but as soon as their eyes met, he disappeared. There was no one at the picnic last time, but she still hoped that this time she had imagined it. Will the Count believe Marie's words this time? She can't tell him what she knows from the novel. The Count said he would expand his security, and although he and Brielle already had a personal guard, it was not enough. He decided that the sooner he did it, the better it would be, and he would soon call the knights. The girl wondered why the Count always listened to her opinion. It was very kind of him. She is grateful to him for this enormous trust in her and sensitive understanding of her concerns. Suddenly, Marie noticed that something was wrong and asked if everything was okay and became worried. The Count said confidently that everything was fine, but it was clear from his face that something was wrong. It turns out he couldn't get the king's words out of his head about how sweet Marie was. The guy himself did not understand why he felt this way. He wanted to understand his feelings and emotions. He wondered who the person Marie had seen could be, and who was watching them. Brielle was being capricious and threw away the spoon, while the girl could not understand what was wrong. She thought that the young master would become less capricious when he grew up, but this was far from true. The baby asked to be fed, although it was already time for Brielle to learn table etiquette. The young master is growing up quickly. One day he will no longer need Marie. Then she would have to leave her post as a nanny, and this upset her to the point of madness, because raising this boy was her only goal. However, she would like to watch such a cute baby for as long as possible. But Brielle, continuing to throw such tantrums, is already going too far and seems to be starting to take advantage of her. The girl quietly knocked on the Count's room, and he asked what had happened to her. She walked in slowly and said it was about the young master, in the hope that the Count would help her. Marie said that he had been acting strangely lately, and she didn't understand what was happening to him. The Count thought about it and the girl asked in confusion if everything was okay, afraid that she had said too much. In any other situation, the guy would have started to panic, but here he sat calmly. The Count said that perhaps this was just a cute protest, and that it was most likely temporary. Suddenly, Brielle was running fast and shouting in his childish voice for his uncle to stop. The Count was extremely surprised that he was already running himself, and was also touched, but not in the basement view. Suddenly, the kid asked if he had a girlfriend, to which he was shocked by the question. The guy asked again what Brielle meant by his question, to which he replied that he couldn't get married until he grew up. The butler saw something on the baby and decided to tell the Count what he had managed to overhear. A few hours ago, Brielle was drawing with his friend and asked Jay if it turned out well. The boy looked at the young gentleman's drawing and asked if it was a monster, to which he replied that it was Miss Bear. Jay looked at the drawing in surprise, and Brielle told him to forget what he saw. Then the boy asked why the young gentleman was offended at him, since he did not want to offend him. The kid replied that his uncle was good at everything, and he wanted to be like him, but he couldn't do it. Brielle remembered that Marie had told him that the Count had drawn the cards for him, and that was why she admired him. The kid, squeezing the drawing in his hands, said that he too had long been like him. Then Jay said that the Count had failed in one thing, to which Brielle turned and asked what it was. Then the boy confidently exclaimed that the guy could not find a life partner for himself. He also said that his father said that the Count was good at business, but not at love. Jay added that it was for the best, to which Brielle asked him in surprise why. Then the boy said that if the Count found himself a wife, the nanny who Brielle really liked would have to leave. The kid exclaimed in shock that he couldn't lose Marie. Fear was visible on his face, as if he had already imagined her leaving. And while they were discussing all this, the butler was eavesdropping on them with an embarrassed face. The Count, having learned all this, promised the baby not to marry until he grew up and no longer needed a nanny. He wondered why it was Marie who came to mind after the question about his lover. Brielle and her nanny were busy choosing a gift for Ellie's birthday. Then the Count finally told Marie the reason for these scandals, and apparently everything was settled, since Brielle no longer suited them. The Count even hired guards for the walk in honor of Ellie's birthday, which touched Marie's heart. He also promised to form an entire order for Brielle, but disturbing thoughts still did not leave Marie. After all, the main threat had not gone away. On that rainy day, she had clearly seen the man who had ordered Brielle's murder. When the girl entered Marie's body and refused to kill, a side story about this criminal appeared. While Marie was thinking that she still didn't know who wanted to kill him, a man with a hood on his head ran past the window. The girl saw him through the window and couldn't understand who it was until she turned around and saw familiar features. And suddenly she was overcome with panic. What was this man doing here? How did he even get here, and for what purpose? Derek, the owner of the longest sword in the kingdom, is a very dangerous criminal. In the original story, he was a loyal subordinate of the main villain and mercilessly killed anyone who stood in his way. Marie wondered what he was doing in the capital. It seemed to her that his fate should have changed because Brielle did not die. The girl was covered with trembling all over her body. She could not move from the spot because of all these thoughts. The baby excitedly tugged at Marie's skirt and asked what had happened and where she was looking. She calmed the baby down and suggested returning to the mansion. She hoped that the Count's story was different from the one written in the novel. Derek silently entered the Count's office with a serious face, and it seemed as if nothing foreshadowed trouble. The guy with a calm voice asked him to sit down because they needed to discuss something. The Count told Derek that he would go straight to the topic on which he had created it and began his dialogue. He said he invited him here because he learned that his brother's death was not an accident. The Count approached the portrait of his late brother and told him that Brielle's grandfather had come today. And suddenly, he accidentally noticed that there was something in the portrait of his late brother. This could be dangerous, and so the guy decided to ask if Derek would be with him until the very end. Derek got down on one knee and said that in the most difficult moments, only the Count was with him, and whose side should he be on? The Count thanked him with a clear conscience, and he silently left his office. Brielle's third birthday was even more lavish than the previous ones, as the Count invited all the most important people in the capital. Of course, he helped with Ellie's birthday, but that's all because of his nephew's friend. The fact that there are many nobles at the festival means that many rumors will arise there. Marie was dressing Brielle for the party when an elegantly dressed count entered their room. He said that they were apparently ready and asked the little boy if he was worried, to which the young gentleman enthusiastically replied, "Not at all." The Count looked at Marie and called her to come with them, and the girl, surprised, asked what he meant. Marie realized that she had reacted too violently to the Count's words and became worried. She was pleased to hear this, but she chose to stay because of the large number of thoughts in her head. The little boy called her to go with them, but the girl tenderly answered him that she would definitely go next time. He cannot appear in high society with a nanny on such an important day in his life. The Count and his nephew came out to the high-ranking people, and Brielle began to worry very much. Everyone started saying how cute he was, and also that he looked a lot like his father. The uncle extended his hand to support the baby, and they began to descend the stairs. The girl watched them from the top floor and thought that she really had come to this world to save the baby. Marie sat on the street stairs and drank an alcoholic drink all alone. Suddenly, the Count came up to her from behind and threw on his jacket, surprising the girl with his presence. He asked the second why the girl was dressed so lightly in such cold weather, and Marie only began to ask how the young gentleman was doing, because she was not at all concerned about her condition. While the guy was talking about Brielle, he saw a bottle of wine and told her that she would fall down the stairs there. Marie replied that her body was tolerant to alcohol, so he shouldn't worry. She looked at the Count with a smile on her face. They were all alone, under the shining starry sky. Suddenly, the girl remembered how the Count changed in the novel after Brielle's death. He cried and thirsted for revenge. Marie told him that they could protect the baby so that he would not worry. He supported the girl with slight sadness and a smile on his face, because he himself believed and hoped for this. Marie decided that they needed to swear on their little fingers that they would protect the baby no matter what. After this, the girl looked at the Count with relief, and he thanked her for taking care of Brielle. He didn't even know if he could cope so well without her and her powers, and he hoped that he would someday express his feelings for Marie. The sweet lady called out to the Count, and he turned in bewilderment to see who it was. He had heard that Her Majesty loved luxury, but today she had only 2 ladies in waiting with her. But he bowed to her, but thought that most likely she was still worried about how she would look in the eyes of her subjects. The lady called the Count by his first name, to which he asked her, even given their close relationship, not to call him that. But the Queen replied that everyone knew this already, and that any other address would look strange. And the Count noted that they live as relatives and managed to meet no more than once a year. The lady asked how the young gentleman was doing, to which the Count coldly replied that everything was fine. The Queen, clenching her fist, said that she had no news about the children, and her disappointment was visible. The guy supported her, saying that everything was fine between her and His Majesty, and he was sure that everything would work out. The girl suggested that the guy meet someone, since he was not married, but the Count only said that no one would want to get married without a chance to inherit their child's life. The Queen said that he still loved his brother very much, and silently left. Brielle called out furiously to Marie, asking if she had seen that he had won. Jay started arguing with the kid, who didn't want everyone to know that he lost. Marie stood between the boys and praised Brielle and Jay with a smile on her face. The one who benefited the most from the young master learning fencing was Barry, as it would give him the opportunity to become a knight in the future. It is also worth thanking all the employees in the Count's mansion. If it were not for them, Barry would have remained just the nanny's brother. The girl, smiling sweetly, served a refreshing drink to the gentleman knight, who looked tired. It was Taylor, a commoner-born genius swordsman, who trained with Brielle. Marie spoke kindly and laughed along with Taylor, and Brielle took notice. The kid immediately started asking for another round, despite being tired, just to stop their dialogue. And the girl looked at them in surprise and did not understand how they could be so energetic. Brielle, with tears in his eyes, asked his uncle to let him down from the horse because he was very afraid. Then the Count's assistant said that they should start with a smaller horse, but the Count said that he was keeping an eye on Brielle. Marie watched this and barely held back her laughter because the young master looked very cute. The Count told the little boy that once he had ridden a big horse, he would never be afraid of a small one, and that learning to ride would go faster. The little boy continued to say that he was scared, and then his uncle sat down with him to support him. They started riding a horse together, and the baby's face was filled with tears and no more fear. Brielle began to call the nanny and boast that he was no longer afraid and was skating thanks to the Count. The Count remembered that the phrase he said to his nephew was said to him by his father. Marie calmly watched the boys move away and enjoyed the moment with a smile on her face. And suddenly, a beautiful white horse came up to her and really scared the girl who was standing there, thinking about Brielle. The man who looked after the horses approached Marie and said that he thought the horses liked you and that he was not usually so friendly. The girl looked at the beautiful horse and thought that it looked very gentle. Taylor asked if Marie would like to ride it, but the girl replied that, unfortunately, she didn't know how and laughed sweetly. Then the man offered to go for a ride together, and Marie looked at him in surprise. Taylor said the horse's name is Dan, and he's not usually too keen on giving rides. He also noted that, despite this, Dan really liked Marie and said that maybe they would be able to go for a ride together. This horse has an excellent pedigree, and no one has ever managed to tame him, so this would be the first time. The girl asked in bewilderment if she could really go for a ride, to which Taylor replied that since the Count was busy training Brielle, he could be distracted. Marie thought that in her past life she had not been able to ride a horse because of the rain, and she could not miss such a chance. The man picked up the girl and began to put her on the horse, and Marie looked at him in surprise. Suddenly there was a sharp scream. Brielle screamed with all his might. What was Marie doing with this man? The girl began to explain that she just wanted to ride a horse, and Taylor helped her get on. The man also began to make excuses, saying that the horse was too tall, and that was why he helped Marie. And the baby screamed that he couldn't touch her without his permission. The baby was shaking with anger, and with a dejected look, he said Marie's name through his small teeth. And suddenly, he shouted that the girl would marry him, and the Count seemed to freeze from his words. The butler entered the Count's office and said that news had reached him that Derek had settled in the capital. The guy thanked the butler and began to slowly take a book out of the pull-out shelf. On Brielle's birthday, his brother was incredibly grateful to the heavens and to his wife, who tried so hard to give him life. It was the diary of the Count's late brother. He did not understand how he could leave this child and die. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. The guy put down the diary and allowed entry into the office. Marie came in and asked the Count to look at their wonderful creation with Brielle. They baked delicious cookies, and the little boy helped Marie cut out the shapes for them. The Count didn't even notice that Brielle was already old enough to create something like this. Seeing Brielle grow up is both the greatest reward and the greatest sorrow. It seemed to the Count that if he blinked, he would somehow be ready to leave the house, and he would no longer see him so often. And Marie thought that although everyone says that the Count is cold and scary, everything is quite the opposite. He even feels sorry to try the cookies. The girl remembered this simultaneously bitter and joyful feeling of children growing up from the time when she worked as a teacher in a kindergarten. Marie abruptly took one cookie and shoved it into the Count's mouth to stop these thoughts. She told him to spend as much time with him as possible and to tell him more often that he loved him. The Count thought about the girl's words, but for some reason she was the only one who came to mind after the words about love. Marie asked if he had a temperature, since the Count's whole face was red, to which he looked away in embarrassment and said that everything was fine. She also started asking if he was getting enough sleep and that he hadn't been seen outside his office lately. Suddenly, the guy began to rapidly lose consciousness and fall onto the girl's fragile shoulder. Brielle tugged at Marie's skirt and anxiously asked what would happen to her uncle. He was very worried about his condition. The girl calmed the baby down, saying that he needed to rest for a couple of days and that he shouldn't worry. This had never happened before in the Count's family. He worked day and night when he suddenly caught a cold. Marie told Brielle that he could get infected and asked him to go to Ellie and Barry, but the baby did not want to leave his uncle. Then the girl calmed the baby down and told him to show his uncle how strong he was, while she would stay with the Count. After sleeping, the guy came to his senses and began asking if Brielle had cried, and the girl replied that he had been very worried. The Count said that the butler told him that Marie had not left him, but the girl could not admit that she herself was worried, and therefore said that she had been looking after him on behalf of the young master. The girl asked him to reduce the number of working hours, as it also affects his relationship with Brielle. Marie told the Count to take the medicine, and he kindly said that it was bitter. The girl was very surprised by this strange behavior of the guy and laughed loudly. He would have laughed if he had seen how clumsy Marie had been with children before. Marie said that she had been too careful all these days and wanted to relax a little. To these words, the Count responded in a calm voice that he believed it and that he liked it very much. The girl looked at him in bewilderment. She didn't understand what he meant. The Count turned to the girl and calmly said that he would like her to feel comfortable with him. Marie looked at the Count again in bewilderment and asked again what he meant. It seems that Marie has become close to the Count, almost as close as she was to Brielle, and she would never have thought that she could hear such words from him.